Thanks for coming down. The weather's not fantastic. I'm the most scenic route of the way here, but thanks for coming down anyway. So for those that may not know me, my name is Lawrence Bourne. I'm a community officer with South Dublin County Council. My conducting is usually my remit as such, but with this project we're crossing over between Tala and Conducting as well. One of the purposes of this whole project obviously is to provide the three information talks that you would have seen on the open Eventbrite, and that's to provide awareness of the topic that David's about to go into. But the knock-on effect is we're also hoping to kick off a resistance training program for older adults within the two centres between Tala and Clondalkin as well. So if there's anyone that you might know, whether it's a loved one, a friend, family members, whichever part of your life, even if you're actually working with women as well in an exercise setting or older adults as well, feel free to pass on this information to them, as well as the information about the resistance training classes. You can get more of those details from me down at the end of the class on the way out. I also have my own contact details and a poster for the last two events here as well, coming up over the next couple of weeks. So, without further ado, I'll pass on to Dr. David Nolan.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much. Good evening, and thanks very much for coming down. So my day job is working up above in DCU, researcher and a lecturer up there. And my research focuses on sex differences in exercise, and more so on the female side of stuff. So do women need to train differently, and some considerations around that. And the other area I focus on then is strength training for health and performance. So we have a series of talks over the coming weeks, but today I'm going to talk about the importance of strength and muscular strength, and maybe a bit more focus on the older adult, but really across the lifespan. Now I will begin by saying this next picture of me does exist on the internet. It was taken out of context, so if anyone does end up Googling me and finds that picture of me, I'm not. And that was in a pub, so it does kind of look like I'm trying to rally troops for some sort of cleansing of the old people from society, but that's not what is going on. So that does exist, and if you want me to get into the rant about why that's objectively true, we can. But just to get that going. How many people think to do enough exercise each week? Physical activity? Anyone? You're all afraid? Okay. You two, how much do you need to do a week? How much should I exercise? Is the first question. In order to know you do enough, you need to know how much you should do. 150 minutes? Yeah. To 300. That's the exercise guidelines, isn't it? 150 minutes to 300 minutes of moderate to intense aerobic activity every week. And for adults age 65 and over, that's the same recommendation. Is that the full exercise guidelines? Yeah. Everyone is brilliant at rhyming off. Well, not everyone. A lot of people are brilliant at rhyming off to 150 minutes, and they neglect the second part. Even people that work in the industry, they neglect the second part, that is the strength training element. 2 times a week at minimum for people 18 to 64 years of age. For those over 65, that increases to 3 days a week, where we want them focusing on balance and functional movement then as well. Problem is though, when people hear about resistance training, strength training, or whatever it is, these are the type of images that come up. And again, I think it's always very telling what society as a whole kind of views, or what the stereotype is. If you put something into Google Images, what pops up? So the kind of sexist view of gym culture maybe is if you put man lifting weights into Google Images versus woman lifting weights into Google Images, you get very different types of images. You get the men lifting heavy weights, and then you get tiny pink dumbbells or something for the female side of stuff. But resistance training, it's simply all exercise, all movement is just contracting our muscles. But resistance training is when we're contracting our muscles against some sort of external force with the intent of getting stronger or increasing muscle size or power, whatever it may be. But it's the force requirement. And that force can come from bands or own body weight. If you are in water, the water is putting resistance on the muscles. But it's all about the intent behind it and the level of force required that will increase our strength. So, why should we exercise? In terms of why we exercise, it's simply, I boil it down to one word when I teach students this, and it's adaptation. That's all that exercise is. We put stresses upon the body, and we hope that we get the stress right, that our body responds and we adapt. Now, when we talk about cardiovascular, cardio-respiratory exercise, again, I should sort of say if anyone's squeamish, that's an actual pair of lungs. But I think we all understand the cardiovascular side of things. We understand why having healthy hearts, healthy lungs are important, its effect on blood pressure and different factors. And we all know that we might know that VO2 max is a very strong predictor of how long you live. So how aerobically fit you are, how well your heart and lungs can deliver oxygen to your muscles is a strong predictor of how long you will live. But why should we get strong? Any ideas? Apart from to be able to be like morally superior to other people because you're stronger than them.
Keeps your muscles active and you can stay moving longer.
Yeah, you can stay moving longer. Anything else?
Prevent injuries.
Prevent injuries, especially in a sports context, or is it just sport? Is it in everyday life? Yeah. So, muscle is important. It's easy to understand why muscle is important for elite athletes, but we forget that muscle is critical to basically every function we do in everyday life. The ability of you to stand up out of your chair and sit down is something that we all take for granted, but we can imagine that what happens throughout life, some people keep their function for their entire life, other people, their strength and their muscle mass decreases. If it decreases to a point where you're not able to stand up out of your chair anymore, you lose basic independence, because if you can't stand up unaided, you can't stand off a toilet unaided, you then need to get help. And that's where older people become a burden, objectively, economically, on society. But again, it's not just themselves. To lose their own independence, to lose their quality of life, and usually loved ones then have to become carers, and there are different consequences there. But it all comes down to the ability of the muscles to generate force and to be able to remain strong, these daily tasks of living. Now, this used to be titled, "Being Weak Will Kill You," and then I thought that was a bit too strong. But being weak will kill you sooner on average. So when we look at muscle strength as a predictor of mortality or predictor of lifespan, we see that those who are weaker, those who have lower levels of muscular strength in their upper and lower body, tend to die sooner. From all this, we always hear this all-cause mortality, but from a variety of reasons. The trend is true in younger people under 65, really gets magnified in the older over 65s. So, what's more important? To hit your cardiovascular aerobic guidelines each week or your strength training guidelines? Ooh, you can only pick one.
You can only pick one. Strength.
Strength? Why do you say that? Because it talks about strength. I'm probably kind of giving it away. So,
If you want to be able to tie your shoelaces and you're 80, strength is important.
it is. If you can only go to the gym twice a week, are you better off spending that time on a treadmill or lifting weights? Oh, it does. Yes. So. Yeah. 100%. So, science does a very bad job, or no, it does a very good job of making very bad graphs, I will say that. And scientists and academics like myself let's make ourselves feel smarter, really. It's an ego thing. But basically, this is what's called a hazard ratio. If you didn't meet the activity guidelines, that is your baseline level of risk of dying, essentially. And what we find is those who meet their 150 minutes of aerobic exercise a week, they meet the aerobic guidelines, have a 16% reduction in the risk of dying compared to those that don't meet the guidelines. Those that don't meet the aerobic but meet the strength side of things have a 21% reduction. So those that meet their 2 strength training sessions a week but don't meet the aerobic tend to be better off, have a bigger decrease. Now, it's not either or, as it always is. Those who meet both have the largest, 29% reduction on average when we look at large-scale statistics. So it shouldn't be an either or, we should aim for both, but as you rightly said, you have to take into context. My argument would be, if you're going to the gym 2 or 3 times a week, just focus on the strength side of things, because there's no point going and using a treadmill or even a bike. I would rather people would focus on strength in the gym and then try to increase their physical activity in their daily life, because you can get enough steps walking around or enough aerobic kind of stimulus if you just try to focus on having a more active lifestyle in your day-to-day. But healthy aging begins early in life, and this is an important factor. And again, another horrendous looking graph, but really important concept. So we're all born and we grow, right? We increase our muscle mass, we increase our levels of strength, but we reach a peak. That peak for most of us is early to mid 30s in general. We are the strongest and have the most muscle mass we have on average. And then it tends to just all go downhill until, you know, mercy comes one day and we die. But for some of us, it's a different trajectory there. We peak in whatever age, say 30, 40 years of age, and then there's a decline. Now, some of us decline to the stage where we get to that level that we can't stand up out of a chair. We don't have the strength. Our level of muscle function drops below what we call this disability threshold. We lose our independence. We can't do daily tasks of living. Some of us are lucky enough that we never fall that low, that we die in our sleep before it ever happens. So what we're trying to do essentially, this decline is inevitable. You know, there's no one that's going to be 99 years of age if they've exercised their whole life that's as strong as they were when they were 35. But if we can get people into the habit early in life, in their 20s and 30s, to strength train and build up this peak so that their muscle mass or muscle strength goes to a higher level, well then when the decline starts, we're at a higher level. We're starting from a higher peak. And if we continue to exercise as we get older, we can slow down that rate of decline. So that's all essentially healthy aging is when it comes to resistance training. It's heightening that peak and reducing that slope or the severity of that decline. I said my research focused a lot on the female athlete side of things, and I think in 2 weeks we're going to focus a bit more specifically on the female side of stuff, contraceptives, menstrual cycle and those roles in performance and health and stuff like that. But females in particular, do they tend to engage more or less in strength-based training than males? Less. Now it is changing, we're seeing the trends change, but historically tends to be less. Is it important for females to strength train? Why?
One rate of decrease is increased once you perimenopause, menopause.
Yes, exactly.
Osteoporosis and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, all that stuff comes in. What did you say earlier? Prevent injury. Anyone involved with sports teams, female sports teams or couple? What are the big injuries, risks you're terrified working with female teams?
I'm track-based, but it'd be...
I'd say track is the same.
Knees.
Achilles, knees, it tends to be ACLs, knees, ankles, the joint kind of issues that come in. So we do see it. So ACL tends to be the big one. We see that female athletes and active females 3 times more likely on average to rupture an ACL compared to a male. What seems to reduce the risk of ACL, the biggest, is getting them stronger, increasing their strength, and also jumping, plyometrics and landing kind of stuff. But getting them stronger tends to be the biggest issue. That's why people love to just put down, oh, it's the menstrual cycle, it's the hormones. Potentially, that's probably a small bit of it. Biggest bit of it is probably that the male side of sports get athletic development and strength training and gym support from under 12s upwards, and the women get it at senior level if they're lucky. So then when you have male players and males have been in the gym 10 years plus and the females have never been exposed to strength training and they're asked to play the same game, and then people wonder, ooh, the women are weak, they always seem to get injured. I don't know, it could be the support structures are the issue. But you're right, the bones is a big thing. So when menopause comes along, we see a massive decrease in estrogen. Estrogen plays a vital role in calcium utilization, interacts with vitamin K, but essentially when the estrogen drops, we see increased risk of osteopenia and osteoporosis. What is the best thing to increase bone density? How much does the average skeleton weigh? Does anyone know? I was going to say strip you all down, that sounds inappropriate. If you had a cadaver and we dissected, anyone know how much the average skeleton weighs? Who would say above 20 kilos or less than 20 kilos? 10 kilos, above or below? 5 kilos? Yeah. Yeah. So between kind of 1.5 to 3 kilograms, depending on your height. It's not very heavy bones, bone density. If you go do a DEXA scan, you can even see here kind of the peak bone mass in grams. But what we see, and if anyone gets DEXA scans on a regular basis, it's very cool to watch it in athletes. You actually see their bones increase in weight, their skeleton get heavier. So we need to load bones. Bones respond to loading. That's why astronauts spend so much time in space, a couple of hours a day, and there's huge amounts of money. I think it's because they're planning on sending us all to Mars at some point to inhabit, but that's the big issue in terms of space flight. How do we not lose lots of muscle and bone on long space journeys? So in fact what they have now, they've invented these machines for the astronauts that essentially it's like a leg press machine, but it's on hydraulics where it forcefully pulls them back in, because it's the only way they can get the load into the bones and the muscles. So we need to have compressive load on our bones in order to increase the bone density. So weight training, actually putting heavy load through the bone, seems to be the best thing to increase bone density. So there's something interesting going on though in population at the moment, and we have what we call this greying population. So people are living longer, much longer. Do we know what the average life expectancy in Ireland is today? Anyone? It's about 82, 83 years of age, between males and females a bit longer, males a bit younger. When you start to think about what proportion of your life that is, that will give you a bit of a crisis. So I think about it on the way home. But we see it, and we expect that to keep increasing. It is suspected that some of the people being born at the moment will live to 150 is the optimistic expectation, the trajectory we are going. But what we're seeing is people are living longer and birth rates are coming down globally as well. So we have this shift where for the first time in human history around 2050, they reckon, there will be more people over the age of 65 than there are under 15 years of age. We've never seen this in human history before. So there's this shifting where if we look at 1950, 5% of the population were over 65. In 2000, that went to 7%, and it's suspected to be up there at, 16% by 2050. So we're seeing this big increase. So, are we living better though? Are people healthier? So we're living longer, but what do we think? Are people living healthier? Students give me some very bizarre answers. So when I asked, what do most old people have? What do you think some of the answers were I got recently enough? I was like, what do most old people have? What do you think? Arthritis, yeah. They said pensions was what they told me. But you're right, arthritis. And I made it sound bad. I was like, old people are diseased. I was like, no, old people have disease. But it's right. When we look at people over the age of 65, most have one form of chronic illness or another. Now that's chronic illnesses, high blood pressure, maybe arthritis, stroke, whatever it may be. But we have these age-related diseases that creep in. So we've got very good at essentially pushing the Grim Reaper down the road. We've got very good at increasing lifespan. But the problem is now we haven't really caught up with the aging side of stuff. So people are living longer, but the quality of life, what we would call, and again, sorry if it's not clear, is this idea of health span. The years that you're healthy for and highly functional. We're still trying to get on top of that. So people are living longer, but are the quality of life in those later years important? Because when it comes to aging, we can think about our normal aging, what people do, and depending upon the way we live our lives, we can age better or worse. So there's chronological age, the amount of years we've been on this planet, but then there's your biological age, what they call it. So if you have a sedentary lifestyle, you're very stressed, poor sleep, you're probably going to age worse and have accelerated aging than someone who is eating well, has strong social connections, less stress, all these factors. They would have decelerated aging. And again, you can think of people you know yourselves that might be the same age and in chronological, but have very different rates of aging. How would you like to die?
Sleep.
In sleep? Anyone ever think about this? It's uncomfortable, but how would you like to die? And that's a thing as a society. How would we like most people to die? Healthy? Suddenly, probably. Yeah, quickly. No pain. So most of us want to die suddenly. We want to be this top trajectory. So this is just function, how well we function. We want to be really functional into our mid to late 90s, really healthy, and then just one night die in our sleep. That's probably the perfect way to go. Or best case scenario about that, be fully functional, really active, and then be told, oh, okay, you have something that you didn't know you had and you have 2 weeks left. Great, time to make peace with it and get on. What we probably don't want is where a lot of us do end up, or a lot of our lifestyle related issues end up, is organ failure, where something goes and something else goes, and your quality of life, you're sick for a long time, or maybe frailty. We know people that maybe have spent the last few years of their life just bed-bound or chair-bound. So again, the functionality is low, and I don't think any of us want to go there. And that's a choice then that we have to make, and the choices we make in life will determine. Because we're all ending up in the same place. It's just how we want to go there. And slowing aging is probably one of the places, well, there's a lot of research going into it. So when we look at the data and the projected, tomorrow if we cured cancer, global life expectancy would probably increase a couple of years. Same thing with heart disease. You cure both of them, we might add 7 years. We find a way to slow down aging significantly, we're going to add decades to people's lifespan. Because as we see at the moment, this is our typical life course. We hit our peak, our lifetime maximum, and then we decline. Our muscle mass, our muscle strength, our muscle power goes down. And it is inevitable. Again, not very aesthetically pleasing graphs, but each of these are just tracking people's muscle size, muscle strength, and aerobic fitness over the lifespan. And we see that it decreases. So, anyone have any relatives or parents or anyone special to them in their 80s? Yeah? Do they resistance train? Do they lift weights? Shame on you. Shame on you. Why not? That's why I tell the students is like, if you have an older person in your life, your grandparents say, and they don't lift weights, it's because you don't love them. It's as simple as that. Or I said they're playing the inheritance game, which I can kind of respect on a certain level. Housing crisis and whatnot. People got to do what they got to do. So, is it too late though? If they're 85, 90? That's the question. And old people, I wouldn't be able to do that. So, when you graduate to be the level of nerdiness I have a favourite research study. My favourite research study is by an author named Harridge and done in 1999. And this is that study. So they took men who were 85 years of age. That was the minimum there could be to be in the study. So there had to be at least 85, some of them well into their 90s, and they started strength training them. Now, anyone know who that is? No? Anyone into golden era bodybuilding? Tom Platz, they called him the quad father. You can probably see why he was called the quad father. But he's doing a leg extension. That's the exercise they chose to do with these men. 3 times a week, leg extension, but to all-out failure. Tom was famous for absolutely killing himself in the gym. But I just love the idea that these researchers got 90-year-old men, put them in that, and screamed at them to keep going, and got paid for it. And that's great. So how they got that through the Research Ethics Board, I don't know. But this is an MRI here. So cross-sectional, you cut the quad in half and you look down into it. So that's the femur, this quadricep muscles and hamstrings here. So the dark tissue is muscle, the white tissue is adipose or fat. And we see that their legs increase 44% in muscle size. So there's this idea, once you get old, you can't even grow muscle anymore. It's nonsense. But more importantly, their maximal strength increased 134%. So each of these lines represents where they were beforehand versus where they ended up. And you can see there's no non-responders. They all got stronger. So really good example of it's never too late. Do we all strength train in this room? Okay. Do we all back squat? put a bar on their back or do some sort of squat? How many people have squatted 50 kilos in their lifetime? Good, good. 100 kilos? 150? Any people 200 plus? About 292 kilos? No, no. Maybe one day, I don't know. But it was Dave Ricks on his 61st birthday for 5 reps. Ooh, it's a bit noisy. Dave Ricks did that for 5 reps on his 61st birthday. Going strong. Weight that none of us will ever even get close to lifting in any exercise, for one. So, people say Dave Ricks exception. Okay. Anyone ever, we deadlift? Do we all deadlift? Anyone ever deadlift 100 kilos? 150? 180? Joe Stockinger, 90 years of age, doing 180 for 3. Canadian fella. And wait till you see him turn now, when he goes to walk away. Is he not the sweetest old man you've ever seen? But you can imagine him rocking into that gym and setting up and pulling that kind of weight. So again, it's good that older people have these role models. And people will say, oh, it's bad for your back. Being weak is bad for your back. You know, strong backs don't get injured. Weak backs get injured. Injuries occur when the stress we place on a tissue or a muscle is greater than the load it can sustain. That's it. The stress is greater than the stress it can tolerate. How do we get better at tolerating more stress? We put stress on it and gradually increase it over time. If he went in day one and snapped, he's tried to do it, yes, he might injure himself. The funny thing is, and this again for anyone that maybe is trying to convince people, if you were to train your arms and they were sore the next day, would you have an issue? Would you be surprised? If you were to train your legs and they were sore the next day, would you be surprised? No. Why then do people train something got to do with their back, and then when their back is sore the next day, they catastrophize and think, oh, I've injured myself. That's not good for me because my back is sore. Your back is sore because you exercised your back. So just something to be aware of. So hopefully now this works for me. If not, I might need to set up my hotspot. Yeah, give me 2 seconds to set up a hotspot. This is worth it, I promise you. Any questions so far?
The men they did the study on, was it purely the leg press, or did they kind of add anything to their diets or encourage anything else?
No, just and it was leg extension. Yeah, because it was low, because no real technique needed, it's just sit in and go at it. But no, it was just an exercise study. Now, it would have been interesting if they loaded up them with protein as well. Probably would have even seen slightly better results. Let's see now.
Can your great grandma do this? Edith Murray is not only celebrating her 100th birthday, she's also celebrating her entry into the Guinness Book of World Records as the oldest competitive powerlifter in the female category. This decorated athlete
apologies for the over-Americanized media of it. Any thoughts, reactions to that? No, she doesn't. And people will always say, oh, they must have been at it their whole lives. Began at 91 years of age. That's the difference. Someone in their 90s beginning. And in other interviews, she would talk about how it saved her, essentially, in terms of that her function was declining and it increased. And again, we see this again and again, the massive difference it can make in people's mobility and strength. So that's some good in terms of role models. So in terms of some practical stuff, if you are working with individuals, and this doesn't apply to other adults, this is resistance training for anyone. When we go to increase our muscle mass and strength, we want to use resistance. We can use our own body weight, we can use resistance bands. A lot of times the most time efficient is to use weights to an external load. Machines or dumbbells, barbells tends to be the most. Because body weight is very good, but we can get we can exhaust it very quickly and it gets hard to overload the system unless you go into some of that gymnastics type of stuff, and very few of us are probably able to do that. So the type of exercises we should do is just what we call fundamental movement patterns, fundamental patterns in terms of we want to squat, have some sort of squatting movement in there. Doesn't really matter what form that we're doing some sort of squat. A hip hinge, so where we're bending over, picking something up. We want to push stuff away from us, pull it towards us, a horizontal push and pull, vertical push and pull, lift stuff overhead, pull stuff down from overhead. Maybe something that rotates, but from a functional then, especially with older people, loaded carries, make the carry stuff. I was on Off the Ball maybe 2 years ago, that show on News Talk. We did a Saturday panel. We were in the studio for about an hour, and I said one line where I was like, if you love your granny, you make her carry in her own goddamn shopping. That's the one clip they snipped and put all on social media. So again, if you couple that with the pictures, it sounds like I really hate old people and I'm really cruel to old people. But it's true, because as a society, what do? We tell old people to sit down, don't we? Relax. You know, oh no, let me do that. We tell people, you go out. We shame children. It's like, don't let your grandmother cut down that tree. You go out and cut down that tree for her. Or, I meant to say mow the lawn, but I suppose they can cut down trees. But it's true. Everything we do, though, comes from a good place. It's good intention. But muscle, as we know, it's use it or lose it. So they're going to lose it. So we need to encourage them to keep it. Because you think of some of the people that age the best. What do they generally do? They're active their whole life. It's farmers. It's people that maybe never retired, that kept working, and they're staying active, and that's the important thing. And especially with older people, when they get sick, we even see there's some great exercise programs now, fit for surgery, in terms of oncology exercise referral. So now it used to be if someone was diagnosed with a form of cancer and required surgery, that they'd rest up for surgery, and we realise that's a very bad thing to do. So if you're going in for surgery, the higher your aerobic fitness, your VO2 max is, the higher your levels of muscular strength, less risk of complication on the table, less chance of dying on the table, and quicker recovery time post-surgery. So now what we do is we encourage them to be as active as possible and to increase their fitness as much as possible. And that's the same with most type of diseases. There are very few instances where we want to tell people not to exercise or not to be physically active. So how hard should I train? The American College of Sports Medicine, one of the kind of leading bodies or authorities in this area, specifically warns against underdosing older adults when it comes to training. People go too easy on the older people, they really do. Where to increase our fitness, we need to stress. You know, we wouldn't expect to get much fitter by walking 2 minutes a day. We need to push ourselves. We need to be a bit out of breath. The same thing is with strength training. In order for the muscles to grow or to get stronger, they need to be placed under stress. Progressive overload, high levels of tension. So, firstly, doing anything is better than nothing. We know that. But as we start to respond to the stress, we need to keep going. So, rep ranges, people get complicated. Generally, what I say to do, aim to train hard in kind of 6 to 15 rep range, depending on what exercise you're doing, but somewhere in there. If you're doing somewhere in that rep range, you're going to be getting a nice balance of strength and muscle mass. And, you know, we've RP, so that's, again, scientists sounding fancy, rate of perceived exertion. That's on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard do you find that? Or we have reps in reserve, where if I give you a dumbbell and ask you to go to all-out failure, where you couldn't move it anymore, that would be 0. You've no more reps left. But 1 before that, 2 before that is kind of the sweet spot. So generally, when you finish a set, finish an exercise, and you're honest with yourself, it should be about an 8 out of 10 in terms of effort. Or you should have been like, I could have done 1 or 2 more there, but really not a whole lot more than that. If that's where a good lot of your strength training ends up, it's good. So say, a good way to find that out, say you're doing something like, I don't know, do people bicep curl? Yeah? Say you're doing bicep curls, 3 sets. Every now and then, again, go to all-out failure on the last one. Push yourself, really dig deep and go all out. Because if you were getting, say, doing a set of 8, and then when you push yourself all out, now you got 15, well, then you were probably lying to yourself in the first 2 sets. If you got 8, and then when you went all out, you got 9 or 10, you're probably in the sweet spot then. So again, we don't overcomplicate it. We just want that's a bit challenging, that it's slowing down towards the end. Then how should you progress? Again, for older adults, for everyone, it's the same. We would keep expecting if we were working with athletes and they were getting stronger, we'd put more weight on them. We'd load them up, we're like, okay, do more. But then when it's older people, 80, 90 years of age, we're just happy for them to go through the motions where load them up, put more weight. So focus on progressing. And again, it could be, last week I got 10 on this weight. In my head, I'm going to push for 11 this week. And it doesn't have to be week on week. It just has to be over time. When you're looking back, 2-3 months ago, am I lifting heavier? Am I able to do a better technique or whatever it may be? You're trying to get some degree of progression. You're doing more sets, more reps, or lifting more weight over time. And keep a log of your training. Again, just a little notebook can be handy. Because you go into the gym, you don't remember what you did last week. A little notebook can be, okay, I did 10 kg, I got 10 reps. I'm either going to go for 11 or 12 kg today, or I'm going to try go for 11, 12 reps and try push yourself over time. And for people who are more technologically kind of inclined, there's plenty of apps there available to do that kind of stuff. Can it be done at home? Again, maybe older people or in general people don't want to go to the gym. And it can. Like, our muscles respond to resistance and tension put on them. You asked a good question at the start when we were chatting about is it okay for children to lift weights? And again, I'm probably biased. You can probably tell by me I'm not the greatest fan of long endurance running. I like lifting heavy stuff up. It's my hobby. And when you break it down, you go into the gym just to lift heavy stuff up and put it back down for no reason. It makes it sound thing. And people gather together in groups to do it, strangers. But anyway, people freak out about children lifting weights. But I think it's funny in terms of you have a child you see a nice cute video on TikTok or something, and it's a little 5-year-old carrying buckets to their parents on the farm, they're helping them, like, oh, that's cute. They were a pair of dumbbells, people lose their mind. Still 5 kilos. If we put bags on children's backs and they climb up a set of stairs in school with 5-7 kilos on their back, we've no issue. If we get them to walk up a set of stairs carrying a 5 or 7 kilo dumbbell, people again, that's going to hurt them. So again, our muscles don't know it's a dumbbell. All they respond to is tension, to load. So there's plenty of stuff you can go around. Again, sounds very odd. One of my other areas of research that we're looking for a lot of money to do research in is the culture of Irish stone lifting. And it's a long, basically colonial kind of suppression of it. There's a long, rich culture. Google a man by the name of Indiana Stones, if that interests you. Best Instagram name you could have for it. But again, random. There's plenty of stuff that's heavy that you can go and lift around your house. So it doesn't need to be. Get creative. And again, we can always make it harder, especially if we're in our house. We tend to do a lot of bilateral exercises, 2-leg squats, stuff like this. What's important with older people? What kills most older people? Falls, isn't it? Because what do most older people die of? They end up getting a fall, they get bed bound or whatever, they get frail. And we probably all know loved ones like that. We're in the full of their health, got a fall, and then within a couple of weeks they were a completely different person. They become chair-bound, they lose a lot of muscle mass, and then this vicious cycle. What happens is what we call a catabolic crisis. They get into this vicious cycle of they're immobilized, they lose muscle, they lose strength, and that leads to even poorer mobility and the increase of falls risk. And unfortunately, what in a lot of cases, someone has a fall, ends up hospitalized, and then pneumonia or something ends up being a cause of death. So we want stuff that's unilateral, that forces balance, that split squats, lunges, different things that allows us to train. And the beauty of that, you don't need much weight because one leg is weaker than two. So if you're loading up one leg, it's much easier to overload the leg, especially this kind of exercise, split squat. You do that, if anyone ever does that exercise in the gym, not very enjoyable. You don't need a whole lot of weight to induce a lot of agony. And again, some of the exercises that you would be surprised makes a massive difference with older adults. So we know there's a strong correlation about how quickly someone can get up out of their chair, walk a couple of meters back and sit down, and the risk of dying. How quickly how you can time, it's called sit to stand test. You ask someone to cross their arms, stand up and down 5 times in a row out of the chair. If it takes longer than 14 seconds, massive increase in risk. That's a potential diagnostic for sarcopenia, this disorder of low muscle function. But that in itself can become the exercise. You ask someone, and I've done it, and plenty of case studies of someone old, frail, you stand in front of them, hold their hands like, okay, now stand up, sit down, do that 10 times in a row with them. And then go off and for an hour or two come back. Do that a couple of times a day. Do that every day consistently. You will be surprised at how quickly someone's strength at that age will increase just after a week of that. And then it's, okay, now we do more. If they're starting, okay, now I won't pull you up, you push yourself up 10 times. Now push yourself up with one hand. Now no hands. Again, you're progressing it over time. Then you throw a bag of shop and a bag of potatoes into your lap and like stand up with that grandma. You know, you got to push them. Because again, people are too nice to these old people. Unless you're playing the inheritance game, of course. We might edit some of that stuff out because that's what will be taken in context, and yeah, that'll be stitched with everything else, and then DCU will be like, what have you been saying again? I'm like, I'm sorry. This is why I shouldn't be allowed out in public. So again, some of the summaries as we're approaching time now. Muscular strength, function, really important. Again, it's one of the strongest predictors of both quality of life and mortality. So we need people's, and again, they don't need to be big, they just need to be strong and functional. So it's not about size, it's more about the strength and function. The recommendations, everyone talks about exercise guidelines. Half the exercise guidelines talk about strength, 2 to 3 times a week. Strength training, very, very important. Focus on the big kind of low-hanging fruit. Do squats, do deadlifts, do carry heavy stuff. The functional kind of stuff. In general, most of your exercises somewhere in the 6 to 15 rep range. Yes, you want some maybe above, some below if you're trying to maximize athletic performance. But for most of us, a couple of sets of the major exercises, somewhere between 6 to 15 reps, once we're working reasonably hard, is good. And then get creative. Load stuff up in different ways if you're trying to do this stuff at home. Because, again, this quote, I'm quite proud of this. You can't stop yourself from getting older, but you can slow down aging. I used to think that quote said something else. I think it's, yeah, okay, we'll go with that. But it's true. So we're all going to get old, we're all going to die, but we can choose how we get there and the way it goes. Any questions? Comments? Anyone going to report me to DCU? I didn't say anything too offensive, did I? Good. Thank you very much for coming to see me.